here, and welcome to the Coach Me to Lead show live on LinkedIn. Today, I'm talking to Rob Hatch. Welcome, Rob.
Hey there, how are you?
It's been a while since we
It's
talked.
been a very long time, but it's great to see you.
Yeah, I agree. So, before we're going to start our conversation, just making a small announcement to the listeners and later on also the viewers of this episode. It's still Coach Me to Lead right now, this episode, but it's going to change. The new name is going to be Better Leaders, and it's connected to the idea that we've changed from Coachdotme to Better Humans. You can read all about it on betterhumans.me. And probably by the next episode, when you're watching this, it will be Better Leaders instead of Coach Me to Lead. But it's just a small change. It's just the name. The concept won't change. So that's it. And Rob, I invited you because you connected me with me again, because you have a new book coming out, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later.
Yep.
And the first time we talked in 2020, was that we talked about your book that you just had out then.
Yes.
What I would like to do today is have like a conversation about the content of the book and probably also weave something of the new book in. And in relationship to leaders, how leaders could use this. I'm wondering what you see, because you coach a lot of people too in your
Mhm.
business. So what do you see with leaders? What is the challenges that they are facing today? What do you find are the biggest challenges for leaders?
I think one of the biggest is always time. It's time in front of the people that they're serving, allowing for time for the people, allowing the time to do the job. Our job descriptions inside organizations are so long, and then there's always all other duties as assigned at the bottom. And so I feel like people are still very overwhelmed, and so they're lacking a lot of even with those job descriptions, with the number of things that come at people. I feel like there's a lot of times there's a lack of clarity, and there's a lack of control over, or feeling like they have control over their time and their decision making. So as a leader, to find ways to give people the time to reflect on what they've done, to make really good decisions, that time to reflect on how is work going, what do you want to do next, what's on your plate, and the time to really put people in a situation where they can apply what they've learned, where to the best of their abilities, their strengths. But that idea of having some control over your time and your decisions and the clarity to work, I think it's just always the perpetual challenge.
A couple of things that come to my mind to go deeper into, because you connect time and decisions, and I'm going to come back to that.
Yeah.
But about time and taking time to reflect, because obviously it will be wise if a leader creates a time for their people, but in the world today, with everything going on, with all the pressure and all the hectic changes, how would a leader, how do you advise leaders to take time to reflect on their actions?
I think the first thing I do is recommend that they find time outside, not outside, but outside of the demand. So one of the mistakes that I think a lot of people make as leaders is to be available at the drop of a hat to anyone that they're serving. If you leave yourself wide open because you want to be an open door leader, that is honestly not doing yourself a service, and you're doing a disservice to the people that you're serving. And one of the things that I figured out kind of in the mess of leading a group of people was, when someone would pop in, I would feel obligated to say yes, and they would come and sit down, but I was already working on something else. So my attention is immediately split between what I was working on, because we know that there's residual attention, and I can't give the person that just walked in my full attention, and I'm not giving what I was working on my full attention. So to find ways to say, actually, let me finish this. Let me kind of close the loop on what it is that I'm working on right now, so that then I can give you my full attention a half hour from now, 15 minutes from now. And starting to find ways to do that, to say no when someone's interrupting you. But the part of that is setting aside time. And it doesn't have to be massive amounts of time, just 15 minutes, a half an hour, a couple times a week, as you can, because it's hard to kind of keep a rhythm, I think, sometimes because of the dynamic nature of business. It would be great if we could say every Tuesday at 2:00, I always do this. It doesn't, I find that doesn't work all the time. But to have a commitment each week to maybe find a couple of blocks of time where you can just kind of pause and take stock of what's been going on, put things in their place, reflect on how things are going, and then it's so valuable.
That was actually an issue that I think the both of us were conquering when we were just managing or leading people, right? So when I was still working for another company as an employee, I was responsible for sales and marketing. And I had a couple of people in my team. And we had an open door, obviously, because of all the offices were open doors, because I had small offices. And there was a secretary, I would call that, maybe in my office too. And then people would just pop in and just have questions on very unimportant things at that time for me. And I was frustrated because I wanted to continue with the marketing project or the branding or whatever I was doing and not answer those questions right now. But the minute they get into the door and ask for your time, already you're distracted. It's going to cost you a lot of time to get back into the focus that you were on before.
Yes.
So what do? You close the door?
In that moment, I still say no. Or like, I can't, can this wait? Or can you come back? And I try to return to what I was doing but I need to communicate, and you don't have to be this overt or clunky about it, all the time. But if you start to say things like, and I even did this with my children, like, I really want to hear everything that you're about to tell me. Whatever it is, I'm sure it's important, but I can't give you the attention you deserve right now. Like, all this is really clunky to have to say all that. But this is how I think you start to affect culture change, is to say, can it wait? Or can we find a time, even in a half hour from now? I've got a little block of time. I'll give you my full attention. And yes, your attention was split and you lost your focus. But to try and give that broken focus to someone else in that moment is still not okay. So oftentimes we're just like, well, I'm done. I've stopped what I was doing anyway, so I might as well. But you're not going to give them what they deserve. So finding ways to articulate that and to give them permission to do the same to you, because I was horrible at this. I was a walk around kind of, leader, and I would check in, and I didn't realize the impact of what I was doing at the time. And it took me a little while to figure out that's not okay. I had to start asking, is now a good time? May I, and allowing them to say, I had to give permission, because sometimes people get, intimidated by position, even if it's a very casual environment, they feel like they've got to say yes to you. So understanding that and being able to say to them, you can say no. No is a perfectly reasonable response if now's not a good time. I actually ask a lot of my coaching clients at the beginning of a call, even if it's a scheduled time, the first thing I ask them is now still a good time for you? Because I want to make sure that they're ready to have this conversation. And I've had a few, it doesn't happen very often, but I've had a few say, actually, this just happened and I am so distracted. And I will allow for, a reschedule. Not, if it's habitual, that's a different story, but I want people to be able to give the work, whatever it is, their full attention. Me, them, themselves. So that's, and to have that ability to have control to say yes and no. And that's where I feel like people, the challenge of leadership, the challenge of working in an environment right now is feeling out of control. When you have control, some semblance of even to be able to say no and yes about your time, I feel like that just immediately bolsters your well-being and your how you feel about the work you're doing.
Mm-hmm. You found out late in life that you had ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that influenced how you feel when people disturb you, that they break the process?
Oh, it definitely feels. It definitely is why those interruptions were harder for me, and that the switch was harder. But it's also part of why I was interrupting them.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a certain amount of impulsivity. I've got an idea and I just want to share it. Those are traits of ADHD that I didn't know at the time. And so I had to kind of make adjustments even before I realized it, and kind of hold on to that a little bit. And just little pieces of initially very clunky communication to articulate the point that it's okay for you to say no, or I can't meet with you right now because my attention's elsewhere, but I really, whatever it is, I want to hear all of it. And again, I did this when my kids were really young and I was working from home. That was a really hard time for them because they didn't know what I was doing. They didn't care. They just wanted their dad. And so to say to them, I will come find you. I really want to see, I want to learn all about this drawing that you did, the colors that you chose, and everything that you want to tell me about it. But I just, let me finish this and then I'm going to come and find you and we're going to talk about it. And it, again, clunky, but eventually it just becomes part of the culture, of the family, of your business, of, the office.
Yeah. One of the children made a hanger for my door, like a sign, like you have in a hotel that when you want to sleep in, they don't come into your room, from Father's Day. I still actually have it. I don't use it. My children are already on their own.
Right.
But I used that when I really needed, they couldn't disturb me. So I hang it on the door. My door was closed. I hang it on the door. Otherwise my doors would always be open for my children, because for me, it was like, okay, when they come in, I need to have like attention, because, but then again, most of the time, what time they come back from school. So you could be more
right,
available then and do just small tasks. It really doesn't matter. So what I've learned, I really use your great sequence or procedure or process from your book, Attention. Are you still using that same process?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Every day, writing out my success block for the first 2 hours of my day the night before, and sitting down, not opening email. And again, it's never 100%. You always kind of slip into things. Something comes up, and I have to kind of force myself to remind myself. But if I have everything written out and I've decided ahead of time what I'm working on, then it's a lot easier. So, yeah, sorry, but you were saying
No. What I did was I talked with a lot of clients about this process because I liked it a lot. And in the beginning, I used the exact same process, and I'm going to explain the process in a bit. But I've in the meantime adapted a bit. So what I now do, because I start my day with reading in a book, and then I go for a walk. So, and also I don't have all the obligations with children anymore in the morning, so I can do what I want in the morning on my own. So now what I do is I have like a break in the day with lunchtime. So before lunchtime, I work on my business, right? So I do the things that I think are important for the future of my business. And I try to do still like 3 goals for that time.
Yep.
Which is usually 3 hours from 9 to noon. And then in the afternoon, I work in the business. So I have appointment with clients, for example. So I've
Yep.
also set up my Calendly where they book appointments, for example, in a way that they can only schedule appointments in the afternoon. So they don't break up my sequence in the morning. It doesn't always work, like you just mentioned, but yeah, like 80% of the time it works, and it means just I have a lot of time available to work on specific things for the long term, for my future, for the business, but also just in general for long term, instead of just being always focused on the short term things, talking to clients and so on. So can you walk the listeners through, because I think it's a really interesting procedure for leaders to see how they could implement in their job and how they work. Can you walk us through?
Yeah, I mean, first, I really like the fact that you adapted it. I love that. I mean, that to me is kind of the point. Like, I'm sharing what works for me, but there's a version of it. Like, there's certain principles there that, and the core one is like put success in your way, right? That idea that we don't want to tax, or I don't want to tax my willpower because, I don't want to tax my decision making, and I almost want to make this habitual in some way, shape, or form, as easy as a habit. So the night before is when I decide what I'm going to work on, because in the moment, I'm very bad at choosing what's good. It's like going to the grocery store without a list. I'm very bad at making the right choices for the food I want, especially if I'm hungry, right?
Yeah.
So in that moment, I'm not always the best. But the night before, I can really take the time to say, these are the 3 most important things that I need to do. And what it does for me is, to your point, when I had very young kids, the day could kind of, blow up in any direction. So I was trying to limit that, because I would put everyone else's needs first. I would do the small stuff. Or when I was working in an environment where I was managing a lot of people, I'm taking in all of their stuff first, emails in or whatever. And I would get so off track, and then I would try to cram my important stuff in at the end of the day before I would try to get home for my family. So flipping that, putting that most important stuff in the morning, means that the minute it's done, if something happens that takes me way off track, I know that I've done at least the 3 things that define success for that day. But like you, I have made some, adaptations, meaning I usually go out for a walk in the morning as well. I don't, have the same obligations. 3 of my kids are off and out of the house. So I just drive the youngest off to school, and she's super self-sufficient. So I have adapted it a little bit, but it's still that 2-hour block, about 40 minutes a piece for each project, and work through that. And then, open up to clients, scheduling the similar way. That afternoon time is really where, or late morning and afternoon is usually when it happens. So that process, though, of deciding ahead of time is super important and effective.
Yeah.
And it gets to this point of restoring control, because when you think about, if you can kind of project, what do I want tomorrow to look like? And I use this example in the first book of Last Night Guy and Tomorrow Guy. So I'm thinking about tomorrow Rob and what he needs. If my wife has a busy day the next day, I know she's like out of the house really early. She's got a lot on her plate. Because I care about her, I'll set things up for her. I'll make sure the coffee's ready. I'll make sure her travel mugs are ready to go, and try to make it really easy for her just to move right into her work. But we don't do the same thing for ourselves often. Just set that up and make it as easy as possible, and kind of clear a path through to doing the most important work. And so I just try to think ahead to, what does tomorrow guy need, and what does he want his day to look like? Do I want to wake up and immediately pick up my phone and start scrolling through emails before I've even gotten out of bed? It's not a fun way to wake up. I want to wake up in a really easy way. I want to go for that walk in the morning, and then when I come in, I don't want to be bombarded. I want to know exactly what I need to do. That's clarity, and the control comes from both of those. Both clarity and control really come from taking time the night before. Even those moments of reflection as a leader, 15 minutes it takes me at most to sit down and just kind of think, okay, what do I need to do tomorrow morning?
Right. Mark Pittman replied earlier, but I just want to acknowledge that he replied so that he knows that we know. But he said, so true, but I have no clue anymore what it was about. That was so true. Anyway, what I think was magical about this part, because I don't do it yet before, I'm not that strong right now, I feel, but I do it in the morning before I really start doing the work. But I think the magical part for me was the 3 things, right? Only 3 items that you do, 3 goals. I always talk with clients about the three item list, and also a block of time where you said. But the other magical thing was the empty piece of paper, right? So the empty sheet of paper.
Right here, right next to me.
Mark says now what most of what Rob says is so true.
Most of it. Not everything, just most of it. Yeah.
But yeah, I always also I use a trick myself, but also I always tell it to the people that I work with, or people don't interested in method. Take a white piece of paper, because once you start writing or once you start working in that zone, in that focus block, things just pop up in your head and they go like, oh yeah, I have to do that. I have to add that. I have to think about that. So if you want to make sure that you get that out of your head, just write it down so that you don't have to think about it anymore. And also you're sure that you won't forget it. So it will get done at some point, just not during this magical time for this 2 hours, right?
That is, those interruptions, my brain is the worst interrupter in that way, because, I'll remember that there's I got to call and make an appointment for the car. I've got to make a dentist appointment, or my child needs to be here or there. And those, sometimes I'll think, well, let me just do that right now so I don't forget. And then the minute I make the call, I've broken my focus. And while I'm on the call, I might try to do some other small task that is, that doesn't require a lot of my attention or thinking energy. So I just open my email and check something, or open my calendar, and now I'm down a rabbit hole. And so that, capturing on the blank page just those little thoughts for later, because you decided whether it was in the morning, and again, whatever works for you. It doesn't have to be the night before. That's just how I do it.
Yeah.
But you've said this is important to you. To the person who was thinking about this an hour ago or half hour ago, said, this is the most important thing I should be doing right now. So let me do that. And now you're going to let that other weirdo who's saying, don't forget to call the dentist, interrupt you? Like, no, just write it down.
Yeah. The part about the leaders, learning to do this, which I think is really important, that because in general, like leaders and managers are interrupted so often in their work, by their colleagues, by their managers, by clients, or anybody who wants to jump in and ask a question to the leader because they need a decision for a question they have or something they need to know. And if you are very helpful, if you're very you really want to help people, of course the logical thing to do is just every time when somebody asks, you will jump and just do it for them. Because if you do it for them, if you help them to make this decision, or if you make the decision for them, or if you give them the right information, that these people can continue the work that they needed to do, that you've asked them to do something. So that's important. At least that's the way you think.
Mm-hmm.
But if that means that you don't get to the really important, the long-term stuff for your job, you will not get ahead. You will not become better. You will not finish your work. And people will also not learn to think for themselves, because if you say, I have this time block right now, which in the moment you cannot break my focus, so you have to figure it out on your own, or you have to come back later. Often, most of the time, people just figure it out on themselves, so they don't come back at all. So
Yes.
I think that's just a magical thing about that time. So I added the Mark quote here. The so true comment was about the lack of time we have and leaders not having talking, giving themselves time to reflect. So that was the part that
Yeah.
I highly agree with that.
And honestly, it doesn't take as long as I think it is, we're thinking about it. It's not like I want to sit around for an hour just ruminating. I mean, sometimes I do, but
Yeah.
it's not, that's not what we're talking about. It is sometimes just a 15-minute, let me go through that blank sheet and put it in its proper place. Let me think about tomorrow, or if if I want to meet with one of the people I'm supervising, I want to leave some time to just not hear the report out, but also hear how an interaction went. So if they went out on a sales call or whatnot, like how did it go? Like what worked? What did you do? What did you say? Because I also want to help them build kind of a framework for understanding how they do what they do. We do so many things just kind of naturally. But when we start to build these sort of frameworks of, well, actually, it went well because I spent an extra 10 minutes ahead of time really reviewing all the notes from the last time we talked. And I went in and I had everything that I needed. And I was able to remember some of the objections that they had to the last time we spoke. So whatever you start to piece together, like, this is my framework for a successful interaction, and you get to rely on that, and it becomes your own. And to your point, to the example of you taking that idea and making it your own, of the success block and the 3 things, it's a matter of when you do it, how long you do it is up to you. Now it's yours. It has nothing to do with me. It's just your stuff. This is what works. And that's control, that's clarity, that's time to reflect. It doesn't take a whole lot of time, 10, 15 minutes in a supervision meeting to ask about these things.
I agree. I think it's similar thing. What you just mentioned is, but when you ask at the beginning of a coaching call, when you ask people, is this still a good time? I do, not always, but most of the time I do ask a question like a check-in. So how are you feeling today? So what's going on in your life right now, right? So how are you here in this moment?
Yes.
And the check-in is really helpful to see if people are just distracted, or does something really bad happen to them just before the call, or or if they're feeling great and are happy because of the weather, so that you have a feeling of the emotions that they have right now when we start the conversation. And also, when something really bad happens, you could just go into that part and forget about the whole plan you had for the coaching call, because they just need a listening ear to to get rid of the feelings that they're having right now. Not even getting rid, but just having a conversation about the things that they process it. Right, that's what I'm looking for. Yes.
Yeah. I actually just had a call like that last week. Someone had just received some news that kind of like really shook them. And so I checked in with them probably 10 minutes into the call to say, is it going to be helpful for us to continue? Or, I'm here, we can keep talking about this and work through this. Or do you want to kind of reschedule? Because I just wanted to make sure the time was going to be valuable for them. And we used that time to work through that. And really, even another 10, 15 minutes in, we were able to get to the core of the work, which I'm not sure would have happened. Their whole day could have been blown out if they hadn't had that opportunity to process it. So I love that you do that, because I think it's so important to give that space. Like as coaches, we kind of ride this line sometimes. It's not always about the, strictly about the advice, or I think it gets misunderstood that we have to go to those places of, deal with some of the emotional stuff that comes up in the context of, just being human, which, that's why I love your rebranding, by the way. The Better Humans part and Better Leaders, and tying that to Better Humans is super smart, because it's kind of what it's all about in the end. I mean, that's the trickiest bit with,
Yeah.
with leaders, is
And
dealing with humans.
I bring this
And
up,
being
this
human.
whole idea of checking in and like you just said, just asking this question at the beginning of a meeting. Because I think leaders should do the same with their people, right? So when they have a meeting, when they have like a one-on-one with a person, you can ask this question, even you had something scheduled completely different. But if you check in, if you have a feeling that it's not going well or something is wrong, just go there and find out and go in the pain sometimes, because it just makes, yeah, it makes you human, but it also makes the other person human, and it will, it will improve the relationship. It will do so much good for your job. Before we continue, I want to say here, this is Noah Weaver. He says, yes, we vastly
Yes.
overestimate the amount
You
of
know,
time we require to gain clarity. Opening my day planner before I open my laptop is my favorite 3-minute hack to build a better day. That's great, Noah. Decisions. It's a topic that I'm really interested in. I'm talking about a lot. I read about it a lot. So how do you help leaders to make better decisions?
it's always a messy process sometimes, but I think it's about kind of narrowing down and getting to kind of what's the core of what's going on. What are we really talking about? Because we can overcomplicate. There's a lot of nuanced factors that need to be considered for sure. But in the end, what we're trying to do is kind of peel away all the sort of extraneous stuff and get to, so what does success look like here? What's the point of this decision? What is making this decision serve? Or and another part of that is also saying we may not need to make the big decision right now. We need to go back to the word clarity. We might need to make a small decision first. And that could be, the first thing I need to do is decide to gather more information, because I realize I don't have enough information to actually make the bigger decision yet. So and then we talk about how we're going to do that or whatnot. A lot of times I just want to put people in a position to make decisions confidently, that they feel like, okay, I understand it now. This is the decision I really need to make. Because again, there's just our brains are so tricky, and they'll take us in so many different directions, that having that ability to kind of talk things through, and just, if all the stuff falls away, kind of like we were talking about with the emotional impact stuff, that if you're really wrestling with something, you're not feeling great, just the ability to process it kind of clears the way for opening things up. And I think it's the same with decisions. So oftentimes I've had clients come to me and say, I want to start this kind of business. I may not have experience in starting that kind of business, but my job there is to help them figure out what they need to know and put them in the best position to gather that information and to make that decision about the next step and the next step. What will help you be confident about this decision and know that it's the right direction.
I think one of the important things, then, what I wouldn't say teach, but when I talk about decision making, is writing your decision on paper, is having like I have like what I call the decision book, which is like a template. We have fixed questions for the decision to make, what's in front of you. And when you write that down, it helps you to improve the decision process, because the tricky part, besides your brain, with decision making, is that if you have decisions where the result of the decision is is far apart, so you have no idea how the decision really impacted the end result, it's very difficult to evaluate your decisions when looking back in hindsight. So when you're looking back, you have made so many changes in your mind, looking on the situation compared to how you looked at it before you actually made the decision. So when you write it down, you can look. So when I look at my decision-making process, then was it correct? What did I do? How can I improve the process? Instead of looking at the result and thinking, oh, this was a great result, so I made a great decision, right?
Yes. And I love that you talked about the great decisions, because oftentimes it's, the bad result, right? We think we made a bad decision. But to your point, I love this, because if you can look back at the journey, the information that you had at the time, it could have been the exact right decision. It's just a bad result. And, in the simplest terms, with my daughter who plays basketball, what I love about the coaches that she works with is they just keep encouraging kids to take the right shot, take a shot. And they'll, even if they miss, they say that was the right decision. And sometimes they're very explicit in practice to say that was exactly the right decision to make. You take that shot every single time, to anchor it, because it is going to fall in at some point. So it's about, the context of that, and not the result. I love that, tracking of that.
So what we're going to do is we're almost at the end of this conversation. But I want to make sure that we have another conversation, because your new book is almost out. You've sent it to the printer?
It's off. Yeah, it's off to where I'm in the final stages of little tiny, does everything look right? I got the full layout the other day, so it's heading off to the publisher for printing, and it'll be out on December 5th. It's called Success Frames is the title. And some of the things that we were talking about today, about reflecting on what went well, and the idea that success is actually a much better teacher than failure. We've sort of bought into this idea that we don't learn from failure, but that it's the best teacher. And actually success gives us so much more to work with, to build on. And there was some great studies that I reference as well about why that's true. But that idea of taking something and creating a framework for what works for you, and making it your own, I think is super important.
So we're going to have another conversation somewhere in December, about-ish, maybe January. I'm not sure when, but somewhere around there. And I'm going to come back to your question, Chloe, in a minute. And because I have this story about what you just described, right? So building on success or building on failures, right? I was working at this company, and I was the manager, and the owner of the company was my manager, obviously. And I had somebody on my team who was doing the sales. So he had a sales call that day, and it didn't work out. And it really brought him down. It really made him feel bad as a person. It really made him feel uncomfortable, unhappy. So it was going like a rabbit hole of really bad feelings. So when we stood in the office of the owner, we talked about this. It just happened. And I was trying to find the positive things, what you learned from this conversation, right? So what were the good things, what happened, so trying to get him out of this feeling, but also to learn from the success in the call, even if it wasn't going, even if it didn't went well. But the owner said, no, we have to look at the failures, because from the failures we will learn, right? So that's what we need to learn. And I felt so I don't know, set back in time. I don't know how to call this differently, because my gosh, how can you just focus on the bad parts of a human to say that that's where you learn? And I think if you look at people in your team as a leader, you want to focus on their abilities, on the things that they do right, and just highlight that and make them more happy. If you have, for example, if you have a conversation once or twice a year to talk about how they're doing, and you focus on all the things that are not right, and say, okay, now you have to take a course or a training to improve that part, you're just making them unhappy, right? So you're going to focus on the things there should be improvement because they're not doing it right. Why not improve the things that are already doing great and make that even a better part, so that you can, use more of it in your company? I don't get that part.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And again, it's not that you can't learn from them, but even starting with success. So if there was, let's say, a process that this person typically goes through, in a sales call. And you talk about all the successes from this interaction. So what did go well? What did you say? What did you notice? What that sets up is the ability then to actually say, oh, I actually missed a step. So not a failure. The failure is that they maybe failed to follow their own framework for success. They missed a step in that process, but the success was really, they know what to do. And so to sit there and like tease it all apart and focus on the failure, as the revelation of all the good stuff, I think is completely wrong. So let's talk about what a good success, what sales call looks like. How did it go this time? What did you do? Did you prepare the way that you always do? And walk them through that. They know what it is. They know what didn't work. They'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But I like to start with that, like what goes well. And build off that.
Question of Chloe. With clients, do you find decision fatigue is a symptom of a deeper root issue? If so, how do you approach finding the root cause?
So my quick answer, Chloe, and hi, by the way, great to see you, is yes, but I don't know that I'm always the right person to uncover the deeper root cause. But for example, if we went back, one of the things that we talked about earlier, Chloe, was this idea of always having to have your door open and saying yes to people who demand your time and attention, and feeling like you've always got to be the one who says yes. That will create decision fatigue. So the root cause of that might be, that you feel like, you've got to, you're a people pleaser. And so you've got this, you've got a different view of what a leader does, that they're always available at everyone's beck and call and not taking care of themselves. So that could be one way in which you are going through decision fatigue, because the things they're bringing to you are decisions as a leader. They're putting that in front of you and asking you for input, which is in and of itself a decision. So that could be one example that I thought of based on that question. I don't know if that covers it for you.
I agree. So I'm going to make a promise here that you who are listening now, Chloe, Mark, Noah asked questions. Thank you for that, for the interaction. We'll have this conversation again in December and talking about the new book and about the success and the frameworks. I have been reading the manuscript. I wasn't finished on time, but next time we'll go more in detail for that part. So that's going to be great. For now, to make sure that we close this one off good. Thank you for joining us today. Let's get this message out of here. And I thank you for joining us and for listening to this conversation, asking questions. That's always great when people be interactive in the call. The video of this conversation, also the audio of this conversation, will be published next Monday. Always the same thing. It's always published on a blog. Although, it's going to be blog.coachdotme. And by that time, next week, when you're joining in us again at 9 a.m. Central Time or 4 p.m. Central European Time, it will be the Better Leader Show. So that's what we're going to do. Hopefully, these kind of conversations, like today with Rob, we will help you to build better leaders or become a better leader yourself. Rob, thank you very much for joining us today.
No, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. It was good talking with you.